Hi there, you are looking at the fastest selling book series in the history of Indian publishing. That's right, that's the Shiva trilogy by Amish. The latest and final book, The Oath of the Vayuputras, has already sold 4 lakh copies. Wow, I'm holding a book that has sold 4 lakh copies in my hand. I wish my book had sold that much. These are the highly successful books of Amish, who has been called India's first literary pop star. He has just got a 5 crore advance for a new series. And we're asking, is English writing in India now highly commercially viable? Do join our debate. Tweet us at IBN Live with the hashtag Indian Writers. Joining us, we're very privileged to have Amish Tripathi, author of the Shiva trilogy. You are a banker turned author, and you have been described as a literary pop star, India's first literary pop star. We also have Ravi Subramanian, also another literary pop star. He's the author of the Banking Chronicles, If God Was a Banker. He's also a former banker. Gosh, what's with you bankers and writing best-selling books? We also have Ashwin Sanghi. He's an author, and he's written Chanakya's Chance and the Krishna Key. He's also formerly someone who has a finance background. And we have Kapish, Mehra, MD of Rupa Publications. Thanks everyone very much indeed for joining us. Let's first recap these staggering numbers, Amish. The Shiva trilogy has sold more than 1.5 million copies with gross retail sales of rupees over 40 crore. 4 lakh copies of The Oath of the Vayuputras has already been sold. You're going to be releasing The Immortals of Meluha in the US in 2014, also due for release in Spain and Indonesia. Wow. When you quit your job as a banker to pursue writing, did you think that you would be so successful?
No, man. I have to be honest though, I resigned from my job only after my first 2 books were released, and I realized that I could make a living from it. I'm a risk-averse banker, man. So I resigned only when I realized, okay, my royalty check is probably going to be slightly more than my salary, and I can meet my responsibilities.
And what made you decide on Shiva?
Look, my books began as a pure philosophical thesis on what is evil, which got converted into an adventure to convey that philosophy. So it's kind of obvious that the best hero for such an adventure would obviously be Lord Shiva, the destroyer of evil.
Right.
Having said that, he also is a very cool god to write about. No disrespect to any other god, but he is a very cool god to write about. He is a democratic god, treats his disciples, his devotees with respect, treats his wife with respect. He's a brilliant dancer, he's a fierce warrior, he's a brilliant musician, he drinks bhang. He's a very, very cool god.
And you made him into a pop icon.
Who am I to make him into an icon? He was always a god.
An icon.
My books are only a very, very small contribution to his greatness.
Let's bring in Ravi Subramanian here. You are an alumnus of IIM Bangalore. You're also a banker by profession. You've written 4 popular thrillers about banking and bankers, and you've sold more than 500,000 copies of your book, Banking Chronicles. Do you ever feel that now it's possible to give up your profession, give up your banking profession, and like Amish, become a full-time writer? Is it that commercially viable now to write novels in English in India?
Sagarika, for me personally, I think at this point in time it's very viable for me to give up my career as a banker and start writing books full time. However, what's stopping me from giving my career up and writing full time is probably the fact that writing is a passion for me, and I don't want to make a commercial living out of it, because the moment I do it, it'll become a job, and hence might just lose the interest that I have in it right now. And to answer your question, yes, I can make a living out of it. So can the other panelists and other guests on this particular show. But the question you have to ask is, can a larger population of authors in this country, or the bulk of the authors in this country who write stories, can they make a living out of writing books? I think that's a bigger question at this point in time to be asked.
And can they? And that's the right question to ask to Kapish Mehra, MD of Rupa Publications. Kapish, you know, just 10 years ago, writing novels in English in India was a noble enterprise. You couldn't dream of anything more than a 15,000 print run. Even the Amitabh Ghoshes and the Arundhati Roys didn't dream of hitting it so big in India, even if they hit it big abroad. This huge efflorescence, this explosion of Indian writing in English, how has it happened?
I think to answer your question, Sagarika, it's in two parts, a yes and no. Is writing in English in India commercially viable? Yes and no. I think in the last 10 years, we have now 3 generations of English-speaking Indians. In fact, we add about 2 crores of children who pass out of English medium education schools every year. So that's a lot of addition to the target pool. Even if 10% of that pick up books, that's 20 lakh new readers who add to the base. Second, today we have a huge online retail e-commerce portals which offer facilities like cash and delivery. I think that's opened up a market significantly. There's also an increase in the mom and pop shops in Bilaspur, Gorakhpur, etc. Small towns where books have become the next new in thing. So I think overall, yes, it is possible to make significant money from books in India, writing in English. So yes, there are possibilities. For example, a Chetan Bhagat sells about 1.5 million copies on an average. Combined of his 5 fiction books, he has sold about 7.5 to 8 million copies in total. But having said so, I think I agree with Ravi. There are about 1,000 or new authors that come out every year from Indian publishing in English, at least. And in the last 10, probably we only have about 7 to 6 people who sort of probably crossed 100,000 copy bracket.
So it's still a very small group of people who can actually access those large numbers. Still a very small group of people, and perhaps they can access those large numbers because of the manner in which they are able to make certain themes very accessible to their readers. Let me come to our next guest, Ashwin Sanghi, who is also has a finance background. You're an MBA Finance from Yale University. You've written Chanakya's Chant, which is your bestseller, which won the Vodafone Crossword Book Award, and in fact your book is also being made into a film. Chanakya's Chant is also being made into a film by UTV. What is it about you bankers and Hindu mythology? You know, if I can just draw the connection between you and Amish, Ashwin, you two have written on you know, Chanakya's Chant and the Krishna key. Do you feel that the theme of mythology, of Hindu gods and goddesses, is this something that is very accessible, that people want to read about now?
Yeah, I think honestly, Sagarika, it's the way the entire market has evolved is that to a very great extent we have a new generation which has emerged, and that new generation has not had their grandmothers or their grandfathers available to tell them these stories which we grew up with. So in fact they want these stories, but they want them packaged in a manner which they can relate to. So in other words, the storytelling style has to be contemporary. I don't think the old packaging necessarily works anymore.
Right.
As I think the old proverb that, you know, easy reading is damn hard writing applies here also, that you really need to toil in terms of making sure that it appeals to your reader base.
I'm going to come to that in just a bit, about how you guys relate to the most scholarly type of literary fiction of, say, Amitabh Ghosh or say a Salman Rushdie, and do you feel that you want to avoid that kind of very niche market perhaps? But let me come to you, Amish. You also take a very important interest and a very personal interest in marketing your books. You know, for example, your latest book has an original soundtrack with Sonu Nigam. It has a snazzy video. You also have YouTube trailers of your book which are up on YouTube. Do you believe that that's important now, and that writers should not shy away from actively plunging into market their book?
Oh, I agree with that wholeheartedly. Look, when you're writing the book, you have to write with the honesty of your heart. Okay, you cannot be thinking markets or commercial or anything at that point of time, because you can't do market research and write a book. That's terrible. Okay, but once you finished your book, you have to be practical and figure out, okay, how do I sell this thing?
Right. And as a former banker, just to pick up on your earlier point, did you sort of see a market space in this Hindu mythology? Did you see that this is the place you could market very well?
No, I always say that you cannot do market research and write a book. You should write a book the way it comes to your heart. You have to be true and honest. Once you've written the book, you should start thinking of marketing only at that point of time, not when you're writing. And I always say the perfect role model is someone like Amir Khan. I don't know him personally, but I'm just saying from what I've heard of his interviews. When he makes his movies, I don't think he thinks about the commercial prospects at all. But he certainly is a pragmatic, practical marketer once the movie has been completed. That's the way I think we need to approach marketing as well. I'm a voracious reader, and I can make a long list of books that I think should have been massive bestsellers, but they weren't marketed well. Now, how are you going to buy a book if you haven't heard of it? And if you haven't bought it, how are you going to read it? So, you know, so every book needs to be marketed.
Right.
There's no either or in this situation.
There's no
you
either
have to
or.
write it well and you have to market it well. There's no either or. You don't have a choice.
Right. And Ravi Subramanian, do you believe that also that, you know, not only do you have to market your books, you also have to pick up on themes that sell. You also have to pick up on the issues and the kind of things that people want to read about. You know, a generation ago, people may have written about the struggles with history, or Midnight's Children, or life in Kerala, or, you know, coming to terms with the Indian identity. Do you feel that all those, the scholarly issues, the grave issues of the day are now things of the past, and now you have to focus on really chatpata stuff that people want to read, that grab people's attention, that are out there? You really have to tell a good story which is not just about autobiographical self-exploration or what characterized an earlier generation of writers.
Sagarika, yes. If you look at the way books are written today and the way books are marketed today, I think it's very important to realize one fact, and that is that attention span of people over the last few years has come down dramatically. You have internet, you have television, you have, you know, the malls you're competing for time with. So when you want to sell somebody a book must be such that, one, the customer likes it, the reader likes it, the reader is able to read it pretty fast and finish it. Look, I was actually, you know, I'm reminded of what Jeffrey Archer once said. He said, look, 50 million women take me to bed every night. But when they take me to bed every night, the last thing I want is droopy eyelids winning the battle over pages which want, over fingers which want to turn the page.
Right,
now,
right.
If you write
so you're battling for eyeballs.
If you write something which people don't want to read or get bored of or can understand, then they are just going to keep the book down. And books are so cheap that it's easy for them to just throw it away and pick up the next book.
Right. So, Kapish, Mehra, then, you know, say a Midnight's Children, or All About H. Hatter, or English August, or, you know, these kind of the older generation of Indians writing in English. Do you think those books really would not have a future now? Now you have to be much more in tune with the kind of short attention spans that the readers have.
I think Sagarika's short attention span is something which is similar to both genres, which is literary as well as commercial writing. I think if today an Amitabh Ghosh or a Vikram Seth was supposed to come out, or an Arundhati Roy was supposed to come out with a new book, it would probably get the same kind of advance or the marketing spend that a Chetan Bhagat, Amish, Tripathi, or Ravi Subramanian, or a Ashwin Sanghi would. So I think these two genres of writing aren't competing with each other. Actually, they complement each other. They're successful in their own space. A new book by a Vikram Seth or a Amitabh Ghosh would sell 100,000 copies in hardcover or more, whereas a new book by Chetan would sell about 1 million or 1.5 million copies in paperback or more.
Right.
So I think both have their own space. They aren't competing with each other.
They both have their own space. And Ashwin, is it important to not be pretentious and say, no, well, we may not be writing literary fiction, but we're writing for a mass market, we're writing to be accessible, and what's wrong with that?
Absolutely. I believe at the end of the day, you need to be true to yourself. The reality is that, I mean, going back to this entire issue of attention spans, there was a very interesting study done in the US which found that the average book browser in a bookshop spends 8 seconds on the front cover of a book and 15 seconds on the back cover. And the average book is only read up to page 18. Now, that is disastrous news for writers like us, because it means that we have to work that much harder in order to actually grab our readers.
Right.
So, for example, in my case, I will typically spend maybe 18 months writing a book, of which 9 months is spent on research, because there's obviously a lot of history and mythology involved, but another 3 to 4 months is spent purely on plotting the book in order to make sure that I'm able to grab the reader's attention at every stage.
Right. So, so whoever said the book is dead was certainly wrong, because when you have authors like Amish, when you have Ashwin, when you have Ravi, they certainly are doing everything they can to keep the book alive. Let's take a short break and come back. We're talking to Amish Tripathi, author of the Shiva trilogy. This is the fastest selling book series in the history of Indian publishing, and he has been called a literary pop star. We're also talking to Ravi Subramanian and Ashwin Sanghi, who also are authors of best-selling books, and Kapish Mehra is giving us a publisher's perspective. I have two questions to ask you. A viewer has just sent me a question saying, please ask Amish, why doesn't he write in Hindi or in any other regional languages if he is talking about Hindu gods and goddesses? The other question I want to ask you is just taking off from what we were talking about in the previous segment about the earlier generation of writers. What do you think of the works of, say, Amitav Ghosh or a Vikram Seth or an Arundhati Roy? Do you feel that these were too niche, that they didn't really reach out to the mass market?
Okay, firstly on regional languages, I agree, far more attention needs to be paid to them. I think in English, so I write in English, but my books have been translated into regional languages. But I do agree, there isn't enough marketing attention paid to regional languages. Lit fairs don't have specific programs.
Writing in English is glamorous, writing in the regional languages is not glamorous.
And that is unfortunate, because as a country we are losing out. There's a wealth of literature in our regional languages. Mrityunjay in Marathi, for example, Parva in Kannada, Mahasamra in Hindi. These are classics which should be shared with all Indians, but because we don't focus on regional languages, we lose this.
And perhaps there's a lesson there for the media as well. How many programs do we do on regional language writers? And what do you think about the previous generation of authors? Do you feel that someone, say like an Amitav Ghosh, is too niche, that he doesn't reach out to a large enough audience?
No, you know, I mean, because I'm a huge fan of Amitav Ghosh's writings. I think especially his recent series, the IBS trilogy, is Amitav Ghosh at his best. It's fantastic research. He speaks of a very sordid part of
but your writing is very different. It's not. You don't try to emulate a scholarly style. You don't try to emulate a very literary style.
There is no way I can be someone like Amitav Ghosh. He is one of the finest living Indian writers. I'm a huge fan of his work. But having said that, look, the way I see it, I find this entire debate between literary and commercial, frankly, a little childish and immature. There are authors whom you like. There are authors whom you don't like. It doesn't matter.
Just different genres which all coexist.
As long as you like them. I'm a huge fan of Amitav Ghosh, like I said. I like Salman Rushdie's work. I like the God
and let me tell you, I'm sure they would do anything to have their books sell as much as yours is doing. I mean, I'm sure they would really want that.
One of the finest living Indian writers.
But let me also get in Kapish here. Kapish, you know, Amish has got an advance of 5 crore for his next series. Now, this is pretty new. This is unheard of. We've heard of authors like Vikram Seth and Salman Rushdie, and of course Amitav Ghosh and Arundhati Roy getting advances from abroad, from foreign publishers. But from an Indian publisher in English getting this kind of advance, that's a big change.
No, I think I think we should first take a step back. Advances are a multiple of sales, and as long as there are high sales, there will be high advances, because publisher obviously forecasts a certain degree of sales and then sort of plows back a certain amount of money for advances. I think kudos to people like Amish, Ravi, Ashwin, Chetan, all of them who sell a large number of copies to give publishers confidence to put out a certain amount of money out there. Having said so, advances what Amish has got or others are not really very new. So even though Arundhati or Vikram Seth do get an international advance, there is a specific portion that's attributed to India. Or say a Chetan Bhagat who sells about 1.5 to 1.8 million copies, there's a significant amount of advance that goes out. I wouldn't want to talk about numbers specifically in case of Chetan, but I can definitely mention that there is huge numbers that we're talking about across the board.
So these are happening. More and more of these advances. So more and more of these advances are happening. I'm sure you're kicking yourself that you didn't get Amish, you didn't bag Amish, Kapish, that you weren't there giving him that advance for his next series. But let me bring in Ashwin Sanghi here. Ashwin, is the Bollywood connection very important? Because your film is being made into your book is being made into a film, and Amish's book, The Immortals of Maluha, I believe, is being made into a film by Karan Johar. Is that also important? Because when you have the Bollywood connection, then that of course takes the big book to another level.
Honestly speaking, I believe that when you're writing a book, then at that point of time you shouldn't have the Bollywood connection in your mind. I seem to agree with Amish's view there, that you should have you should remain pure and true to yourself while you're writing it.
That's the question I was going to ask, that when you're writing, do you think that I'm actually writing a film script, or I'm writing a book that can be made into a film? Are you thinking film when you're writing a book?
No, never. The truth is that, I feel that I have a lot more flexibility as a novelist than I have as a screenplay writer. As a novelist, I can choose to kill my hero on page 45, whereas a screenplay would probably say, hey, listen, what's going to happen to the rest of the movie? I can choose to hop from Venice to Rome, to London to Berlin, whereas a screenplay will have to take into account production costs. So in fact, I have a much more luxurious job in that sense. It's much easier. And so therefore, I genuinely believe that as a writer, you should sort of write without thinking about the Bollywood connection. But if it does happen, yes, I do believe that it can take your book to the next level because of the marketing, the spin-off that comes from that connection.
Right, and it certainly sort of adds to that multimedia dimension of the book that we're talking about. Ravi Subramanian, just to point out that fact, do you also believe that it's very important that a book lend itself to many mediums, to film, to audio, to all the various mediums that are available, to the internet, in today's age? That, the old days of just writing a book, which is a massive tome which you sat down to read for hours, that form is perhaps dead.
I would disagree with it. I think at this point in time, when you write a book, the first thing in your mind is a book.
Right.
Whether it's a physical book or a book on the, or it's an e-book or whatever it is. But the first thing you think about is the next 300 pages. How do I tell a good story to the reader? Now, just a point in case, take John Grisham. Okay.
Right.
Each and every of his book has been made into a film.
Right.
Okay. Take Jeffrey Archer. None of his books have been made into a film, but both of them are superlative authors whose books sell even today.
Okay.
My books have not been made into a film.
Now, you're probably next in line. You're probably next in line.
It's not necessary.
But tell me, what is it about bankers that is drawing them to fiction and mythological fiction? What drew you to you're all bankers. You all have a finance background, and you've all written these best-selling books. What's the secret? What's the trend I'm missing here? What's the missing link? What's the cosmic string?
I don't know about mythological fiction which Ashwin and Amish write about, but as far as I'm concerned,
why banks are going bankrupt.
I wrote about banking,
is what Amish is saying.
Particularly about banking, because that's an industry which employs the maximum number of people in India and touches every single life.
Right.
And, your channel covered the Cobra posting some time back.
Right.
People
I was going to ask you that.